The shuttle landed on the platform with a soft hiss. Taiho stepped out and looked up at the crystal spire for the first time. The palace rose into the purple sky like a blade made of light. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. And starting today, it was his home. He carried one bag over his shoulder. Inside were his clothes, a small book of poems his mother had given him, and a photograph of his family back on Earth. Everything else he owned had been sold to pay for his training. 3 years of military academy, 2 years of diplomatic service, all of it leading to this moment. A human serving in the Royal Guard of the Valorian Empire. The Valorians were waiting for him at the gate. They stood nearly 7 feet tall, their bodies covered in hard shells that shimmered like oil on water. Their faces had no expression that Taiho could read. 12 eyes looked down at him. Mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter or disgust. "This is the human," one of them said. "It appears so," another replied. "Smaller than I expected." Taiho said nothing. He had been warned about this. The Valorians did not think highly of humans. To them, humans were soft creatures from a small planet at the edge of known space. They broke easily. They died quickly. They were not worthy of respect. But Earth needed this alliance. The Valorian Empire controlled half the galaxy. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything humans had built. One human soldier serving in the Royal Guard was a symbol, a promise that the two species could work together. Taiho was that symbol. He did not choose this duty. But he would not fail it. Captain Rishon met him in the training hall. The captain was old for a Valorian. His shell had faded to a dull gray, and one of his arms was missing below the elbow. But his eyes were sharp, and his voice was cold. "You are the human," Rishon said. It was not a question, as captain. "My name is Taiho. I am honored to serve." Rishon walked around him slowly. He examined Taiho the way a farmer might examine a sick animal. "You have no shell," Rishon said. "Your skin can be cut with a kitchen knife. Your bones break under pressure that would not bother a child of our species. You cannot see in the dark. You cannot hear the frequencies we use to communicate. You are slow. You are weak. And you expect to guard the queen?" "I expect to try," Taiho said. Rishon's mandibles clicked. "Then you are also foolish. But perhaps that is why they sent you. Humans are known for their foolishness." The training began the next day. It was brutal. Valorian combat was built around their natural advantages. Their hard shells could stop most blades. Their multiple limbs could attack and defend at the same time. Their compound eyes could see in every direction. Taiho had none of these things. He was knocked down 100 times in the first week. His body was covered in bruises. His ribs cracked. His nose broke twice. The Valorian guards watched him struggle and made no effort to hide their amusement. "Why does he keep getting up?" one asked. "Perhaps humans are too stupid to know when they have lost," another replied. But Taiho kept getting up. Every time he fell, he stood again. Every time he failed, he tried again. He could not match the Valorians in strength or speed, so he learned to be clever. He studied their movements. He memorized their patterns. He found the small gaps in their defenses that they did not know existed. After 3 months, he landed his first hit on a Valorian opponent. It was nothing serious, a tap on the shoulder. But the training hall went silent. No one laughed at him that day. Taiho was assigned to the night shift. It was the worst duty in the palace. The corridors were cold and dark. Nothing ever happened. It was a punishment, and everyone knew it. He walked his patrol route every night without complaint. He checked every door. He examined every shadow. The other guards ignored him when they passed. Some of them spat on the ground near his feet. One night, he heard voices in a corridor that should have been empty. Taiho pressed himself against the wall and listened. 2 Valorians were speaking in low tones. He could not understand all of their words. The Valorian language had sounds that human ears could not fully process. But he understood enough. They were talking about the queen. They were talking about change. They were talking about blood. Taiho reported what he heard to Captain Rishon the next morning. The captain listened without expression. When Taiho finished, Rishan was silent for a long moment. "You are mistaken," Rishan finally said. "You heard nothing." "Captain, I am certain that you are a human," Rishan interrupted. "Your ears are weak. Your understanding of our language is poor. You imagined this conversation. There is no conspiracy. The noble houses are loyal to the queen. This discussion is over." Taiho wanted to argue, but he saw the look in Rishan's eyes. It was not anger. It was fear. The captain knew something, and he did not want to know more. Taiho returned to his duties, but he did not forget what he had heard. Over the following months, he watched more carefully. He noticed things that others missed or chose to ignore. Servants who disappeared without explanation. Messages delivered in the middle of the night. Noble houses that suddenly grew wealthy while others fell into poverty. And always whispers in the dark corridors, something was coming. Taiho could feel it the way a sailor feels a storm before it arrives. The air itself seemed heavy with danger. He tried to warn others. He spoke to guards he thought might listen. They told him to mind his own business. They told him he was paranoid. They told him that humans did not understand Valorian politics. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps he was imagining things. Perhaps his human mind was creating patterns where none existed. But Taiho did not think so. He continued his patrols. He continued his training. He continued to watch and wait. If no one would believe him, then he would have to be ready when the danger finally revealed itself. 2 years passed. Taiho grew stronger. Not Valorian strong, but strong enough. He earned grudging respect from some of his fellow guards. Not friendship. Never friendship. But they no longer spat when he walked by. They no longer laughed at his soft skin and dull senses. He was given a new assignment. The Queen's private chamber? It was the highest honor a guard could receive. Rishan delivered the news himself, and for once the old captain almost looked pleased. "You have proven yourself human," Rishan said. "Against my expectations? Against the expectations of everyone. You will stand before the Queen herself." Taiho bowed. "I will not fail her." "See that you don't," Rishan replied. "The Festival of Falling Stars begins tomorrow. The entire empire will be watching. If you shame us, there will be no second chances." That night, Taiho stood at his new post for the first time. The Queen's chamber was beautiful beyond words. Crystal walls reflected 1,000 colors. Soft light filled the air like mist. And at the center of it all, Queen Velis rested on her throne. She looked at him with all 12 of her eyes. "So you are the human," she said. Her voice was like music and thunder combined. "Yes, Your Majesty. They say you are stubborn. That you refuse to quit even when wisdom demands it. I prefer to call it determination, Your Majesty." The Queen made a sound that might have been laughter. "We shall see, little human. We shall see what your determination is worth when it is truly tested." Taiho did not know it then, but his test was coming, and it would come sooner than anyone expected. The Festival of Falling Stars was the greatest celebration in the Valorian Empire. Once every 20 years, a river of meteors crossed the sky above the capital world. The entire planet gathered to watch. Music filled the streets. Lights danced on every building. Children ran through the crowds while their parents laughed and sang. Taiho stood at his post outside the Queen's chamber and listened to the distant sounds of joy. He could not see the celebration from here. The Queen's private wing was deep inside the crystal spire, far from windows or open air, but he could imagine it. He had seen pictures. He had heard stories. It was supposed to be a night of peace. The first explosion came without warning. The floor shook beneath Taiho's feet. The crystal walls trembled. A sound like thunder rolled through the palace, followed by screams. Then came the alarms. Red light flooded the corridor. A voice began repeating the same message over and over in Valorian. Taiho did not need to understand the words. He knew what they meant. The palace was under attack. He drew his blade and checked his plasma pistol. Both were ready. His heart was beating fast, but his hands were steady. He had trained for this moment. He had imagined it 1,000 times, but nothing could have prepared him for what came next. Guards ran past him in both directions. Some were heading toward the fighting. Others were heading away. Taiho could hear weapons firing somewhere below. The screams were getting louder. Captain Rishon appeared at the end of the corridor. His shell was cracked in several places, and green blood dripped from a wound on his head. "The vault is compromised," Rishon shouted. "Traitors everywhere. We cannot move the queen underground. We must hold this position until reinforcements arrive." "How long?" Taiho asked. "I do not know. Communications are down." They knew our frequencies. They knew our codes. Someone on the inside gave them everything. Taiho thought of the whispers he had heard 2 years ago, the conspiracy he had tried to report, the warning that no one would believe. There was no time to think about that now. More explosions shook the palace. The lights flickered and died. Emergency power kicked in, but it was weak. The corridor was filled with shadows. Rishon gathered the remaining guards. There were 12 of them, including Taiho, 12 soldiers to protect the queen of an empire that spanned 1,000 worlds. "We'll form a defensive line here," Rishon said. "No one passes. No matter what. Is that understood?" The guards clicked their mandibles in agreement. Taiho nodded. They waited. The rebels came in waves. They wore black armor that absorbed the light. Their weapons fired bolts of energy that crackled against the crystal walls. Taiho had never seen weapons like these before. They were designed to penetrate Valorian shells. Each hit left smoking holes in the guards around him. The first guard fell in minutes. Then the second, then the third. Taiho fired his pistol until it was hot in his hand. He cut down to rebels who got too close. But there were too many of them. For every one that fell, 3 more took their place. Rishon was hit in the chest. He staggered but did not fall. He kept fighting with one arm while the other hung useless at his side. Green blood covered the floor beneath his feet. "Fall back," Rishon screamed. "Fall back to the chamber." But the guards were not falling back. They were running. Taiho watched in disbelief as the Valorian soldiers turned and fled. They dropped their weapons. They pushed past each other in their rush to escape. Their eyes were wide with a fear that seemed to erase everything else. Training, duty, honor, all of it vanished in an instant. He did not understand. These were elite guards. The best soldiers in the Empire? They had trained their entire lives for moments like this. Why were they running? Later, he would learn the truth. The Valorians had evolved from prey species millions of years ago. Deep in their brains, buried under layers of civilization and discipline, was an ancient instinct. When true danger came, when death was certain, that instinct screamed at them to run, to survive, to flee and live another day. They could not help it. It was in their blood. But Taiho was not Valorian. Humans had evolved differently. They had hunted animals larger than themselves. They had faced predators with nothing but rocks and sticks. They had learned to stand their ground even when every part of their body told them to run. It was not courage. It was something older, something deeper, the ability to choose. When the last Valorian guard fled past him, Taiho made his choice. He stepped forward and sealed the chamber doors behind him. The corridor was empty now, except for bodies and blood. Taiho could hear the rebels regrouping at the far end. They would be coming soon, dozens of them, maybe more. He had one pistol with half a charge remaining, one blade, one door that would not hold forever, and behind that door, the queen of the Valorian Empire. He turned to face her. Queen Velisis had risen from her throne. Her 12 eyes reflected the emergency lights like stars. She was beautiful and terrible, ancient and powerful. And for the first time since he had arrived at the Crystal Spire, she looked afraid. "You should flee, little human," she said. "The others have gone. No one would blame you. You owe me nothing." Taiho shook his head. "I swore an oath, Your Majesty. I swore to protect you. Where I come from, that means something. You will die. Maybe, probably, but I will die at my post." The queen stared at him. Her mandibles moved, but no sound came out. She seemed to be searching for words that did not exist. "Why?" she finally asked. I do not understand. Your instincts must tell you to run. How do you ignore them? Taiho smiled. It was a strange smile, tired and sad, and somehow peaceful. We don't ignore them, Your Majesty. We feel them. The fear, the urge to run. It's there screaming in our heads, but we can choose not to listen. Humans can always choose. The pounding on the door began. The rebels had arrived. Taiho could hear them on the other side, preparing their weapons. The door shook with each impact. He raised his blade and faced the entrance. Stay behind me, Your Majesty. As far back as you can. There are too many of them. Then I will have to kill too many of them. The door began to crack. Light from the corridors spilled through the gaps. Shadows moved on the other side. The pounding grew louder, faster, more desperate. Taiho took a deep breath. He thought of his mother back on Earth. He thought of the book of poems in his bag. He thought of all the things he would never do and all the places he would never see. Then he stopped thinking. The door exploded inward. The rebels poured through like water through a broken dam. Taiho met them with his blade. The long night had begun. The first rebel through the door was fast. He fired his weapon before his feet touched the ground. The bolt of energy screamed past Taiho's head and struck the crystal wall behind him. It left a smoking hole the size of a fist at Taiho. Did not give him a chance for a second shot. He moved forward and drove his blade into the gap between the rebel's helmet and chest armor. The rebel made a gurgling sound and fell. Taiho pulled his blade free and met the next enemy. They came in groups of 3 and 4. The doorway was narrow, which helped. They could not all attack at once. Taiho used this to his advantage. He forced them to fight him one at a time, blocking the entrance with his body, and the bodies of those who fell before him. His pistol found targets in the crowd beyond the door. He fired until the weapon clicked empty. Then he threw it at the face of an approaching rebel and used the persolve distraction to cut him down. The rebels were not prepared for this. They had expected the guards to flee like the others. They had not expected a human with a broken blade standing in their way like a wall of iron. Kill him. Someone shouted from the back. He is just one man. But being just one man meant nothing if that one man refused to move. The minutes stretched into hours. Taiho lost track of time. He lost track of everything except the next enemy in front of him. Strike, block, move, breathe, strike again. His world became very small and very simple. He took his first serious wound 20 minutes in. A blade caught him across the back, cutting through his armor and into the muscle beneath. The pain was blinding. His vision went white for a moment, but he did not fall. He turned and killed the rebel who had cut him before the enemy could strike again. Blood ran down his back. His own blood. Red blood. It pooled on the floor and made his feet slip. He adjusted his stance and kept fighting. Queen Velisis watched from the far corner of the chamber. She had not moved since the fighting began. Her 12 eyes tracked every movement Taiho made. She saw him stumble. She saw him bleed. She saw him kill and kill and kill. She had lived for 300 years. She had seen countless battles. She had watched the greatest warriors of her species fight and die. But she had never seen anything like this. The human should have fallen long ago. His body was not built for this kind of punishment. His skin tore like paper. His bones cracked under impacts that would barely scratch a Valorian. And yet he kept standing. He kept fighting. He kept pushing forward as if his own death meant nothing to him. How? She whispered to herself. How is this possible? The rebels were asking the same question. Their initial confidence had faded. They had lost too many soldiers to this single defender. The entrance to the chamber was blocked by a wall of their own dead. One of them called for a pause. The fighting stopped. Taiho stood in the doorway, swaying on his feet. His blade was chipped and dull. His armor was torn in a dozen places. Blood covered him from head to foot, some of it his own, and some of it from his enemies. Human, the rebel commander called out. You have fought well. Better than any of us expected. But this is foolishness. You cannot win. Lay down your weapon, and we will let you live. You have no reason to die for an alien queen. Taiho's breath came in ragged gasps. His vision was blurring. The wound on his back was still bleeding, and he could feel his strength leaving him drop by drop. He thought about the offer. He thought about stepping aside. He thought about living. Then he thought about the oath he had sworn, the promise he had made, the duty he had accepted. "I have every reason," he said. His voice was hoarse but steady. "She is my queen. This is my post, and I will not move." The fighting resumed. The second wave was worse than the first. The rebels were angry now. They had lost face to a human. They attacked with fury and desperation. Throwing themselves at Taiho without care for their own safety, he took a wound to his shoulder, then another to his leg, then another across his chest. Each one stole a little more of his strength. Each one pushed him a little closer to the edge. His blade broke against a rebel's armor. He grabbed the broken piece and used it to stab the enemy in the neck. Then he picked up a fallen weapon and kept fighting. When that weapon was knocked from his hands, he used his fists. When his fists were broken and bleeding, he used a chair from the queen's chamber. When the chair shattered, picked up a piece of crystal from the broken wall and used it as a knife. He would not stop. He could not stop. Something inside him had gone beyond fear, beyond pain, beyond thought. There was only the fight, only the next enemy, only the duty. The rebels began to lose their will. They had never faced anything like this. Their own instincts were screaming at them to run from this creature that would not die. Some of them did run. Others held their ground. Their attacks grew slower and more hesitant. By the time the sky outside began to lighten, the floor was covered with bodies. 23 rebels lay dead at Taiho's feet. Dozens more had fled into the dark corridors of the palace. The rest hung back, unwilling to pay the price of crossing the doorway. Taiho stood alone in the entrance. He could barely see. He could barely stand. His body was a map of wounds and blood and pain. But he had not taken a single step backward. Queen Valesis rose from her corner and approached him slowly. She had never been this close to a human before. She had never looked into their strange, simple eyes and tried to understand what lay behind them. "Why won't you fall?" she asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. "What are you?" Taiho turned to look at her. One of his eyes was swollen shut. Blood dripped from a cut on his forehead. But he managed to smile. It was a terrible smile, more grimace than joy, but it was real. "I'm human," he said. "We're stubborn. It's our worst trait." And he collapsed. He hit the ground hard and did not move. His chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. Blood spread beneath him in a growing pool. He had given everything he had. There was nothing left. The rebels saw him fall. They began to move forward. But they were too late. The sound of weapons fire erupted from somewhere in the palace. Shouts and screams followed. The rebels turned to face this new threat, and then they ran. Not toward the queen's chamber, but away from it. Something had changed. Something had shifted. Queen Valesis did not know what was happening. She did not care. She knelt beside the broken human and placed one of her hands on his chest. She could feel his heart still beating. Weak. Fading. But fighting. Still fighting. "Hold on, little human," she said. "Help is coming. Hold on." She did not know if he could hear her, but she stayed with him anyway, waiting for the dawn. The reinforcements came with the sunrise. General Nahong led them through the burning corridors of the Crystal Spire. She was human. Like Taiho, sent from the diplomatic fleet when news of the attack reached the orbiting ships. Behind her came a mixed force of loyalist Valorians and human marines. They found the rebels scattered and broken. Some surrendered without fighting. Others tried to run and were cut down in the palace gardens. Lord Varric, the queen's cousin and the leader of the rebellion, was captured trying to escape through a maintenance tunnel. He did not resist when they put him in chains, but General Naong was not interested in the rebel leader. She was looking for something else. "Someone else? Where is the queen?" she demanded. A Valorian soldier pointed toward the private wing. "Her chamber. The door is blocked." Nahom ran. Her boots echoed on the crystal floor. She passed bodies and wreckage and fire. The palace that had once been the most beautiful building in the empire was now a smoking ruin. But she did not slow down until she reached the queen's chamber. The scene that met her there would stay with her for the rest of her life. Bodies were piled in the entrance like a wall. Rebel soldiers, still in their black armor, stacked 3 and 4 deep. Beyond them, in the doorway itself, was more blood than she had ever seen in one place. It covered the floor. It covered the walls. It covered the broken furniture and shattered crystal. And in the middle of it all, Queen Velas's knelt beside a human soldier. Taiho was barely alive. His skin was gray. His breathing was so shallow that it was almost invisible. The wounds on his body were too many to count. He should have been dead. By every measure that made sense, he should have been dead hours ago. But his heart was still beating. Get the medics. Nehong screamed. Get them now. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Taiho was carried to the medical wing. Human doctors worked alongside Valorian healers to repair the damage to his body. They gave him blood. They closed his wounds. They fought to keep him alive with every tool they had. Queen Velas's refused to leave the medical wing. Her advisors begged her to rest. Her guards told her it was not safe. She ignored them all. She stood outside the surgery room and waited. When the doctors finally emerged, their faces were exhausted, but hopeful. He will live, the lead surgeon said. We don't know how. His body should have shut down long before we reached him. But he held on. Somehow, he held on. The queen said nothing. She simply nodded and continued her vigil. In the days that followed, the rebellion was dismantled. The traitors were arrested. The damaged palace was secured. Life in the empire slowly began to return to normal. But Queen Velas's did not return to her throne. She spent her days in the palace library, reading. Not about politics or war or diplomacy. About humans, she read their history. She learned about a species that had nearly destroyed itself a dozen times, but always managed to survive. Wars that killed millions, plagues that swept across continents, disasters that should have ended their civilization forever. And through it all, they kept going. They rebuilt. They recovered. They refused to quit. She learned about their biology. The strange cocktail of chemicals in their brains that could override fear and pain. The ability to push their bodies beyond normal limits in moments of crisis. Something human scientists called adrenaline and willpower. Things that seemed almost magical to a species that had evolved to flee from danger. She learned about their culture. The value they placed on loyalty and honor. The stories they told about heroes who stood alone against impossible odds. The belief that some things were worth dying for. We have misunderstood them, she said to herself. All this time, we thought they were weak. But we were wrong. Taiho woke up on the 7th day. He opened his eyes and saw white walls and soft light. For a moment, he did not know where he was. Then the memories came flooding back. The fire, the fighting, the door that he had sworn to hold. He tried to sit up. Pain shot through his entire body, and he fell back against the bed with a groan. Easy, a voice said. Your body is still healing. You should not move too quickly. Queen Velasys stepped into his field of vision. She looked different than he remembered. Smaller, somehow. More tired. But her 12 eyes were gentle. Your Majesty, Taiho said. His voice was rough and weak. Are you safe? The queen made a sound that might have been a laugh. That is the first thing you ask? Not about yourself? Not about your wounds? I was doing my duty. The wounds don't matter. They matter to me. The queen moved closer. You saved my life, human. You stood when all others fled. You fought when all others ran. I have ruled this empire for 300 years, and I have never seen courage like yours. Taiho shook his head. It wasn't courage, Your Majesty. I was afraid. I was terrified. Every moment of that night I wanted to run, but you didn't. No, I didn't. Why? It was the same question she had asked him before. And now, finally, he had the strength to answer properly. Because I chose not to, he said. Humans can't always control how we feel, but we can control what we do. I was afraid, but I chose to stay. I was hurting, but I chose to fight. That's what we are, Your Majesty. We are the species that can choose. Queen Velisis was silent for a long moment. She seemed to be processing his words, turning them over in her mind like precious stones. We Valorians cannot do this, she finally said. When the ancient fear takes us, we cannot resist it. Our minds shut down. Our bodies flee. It is our greatest weakness, and we have hidden it for millennia. But you know our secret now. You saw my guards run? I won't tell anyone. I know you won't. The queen reached out and placed one of her hands on his. Her touch was cool and smooth. You are not like the others, Taiho, not like any human I have met. You have shown me something I never understood before. What is that, Your Majesty? That strength is not about the body. It is not about speed or armor or weapons. True strength is about the will, the choice, the decision to stand when everything inside you says to fall. Your species is not weak, Taiho. You are simply strong in a different way, a way we never recognized. Taiho felt tears forming in his eyes. He blinked them away. Thank you, Your Majesty, no, the queen said. Thank you for teaching me, for saving me, for being exactly what you are. She stood and walked toward the door. But before she left, she turned back one more time. Rest now, Taiho. Heal when you are ready. We will talk about the future. I have plans for you. For all your people. Then she was gone. And Taiho was alone with his thoughts and his wounds and the strange warm feeling that maybe, just maybe, everything he had suffered had been worth it. The weeks after the rebellion were a time of change. Queen Velisis addressed her empire from the rebuilt throne room of the Crystal Spire. Billions watched across 1,000 worlds. They expected her to speak of justice and punishment, of traitors and revenge. Instead, she spoke of a human. On the night of the falling stars, she said, "My guards fled. Every one of them. They abandoned their oaths and their duty because their instincts commanded them to run. I do not blame them. They could not help what they were. But one soldier remained. One soldier stood before my door and refused to move, even when death was certain. That soldier was human." The Empire listened in stunned silence. For too long we have looked down on humanity. We called them weak. We called them fragile. We called them lesser beings from a lesser world. But we were wrong. Strength is not measured by the hardness of your shell or the sharpness of your claws. Strength is measured by the will to stand when standing seems impossible. And by that measure, humans are the strongest species I have ever known. The speech changed everything. Human diplomats found doors opening that had been closed for decades. Human traders were welcomed in markets that had once refused them entry. Human soldiers were recruited into elite units across Valorian space. Not for their speed or their strength or their technology, for their reliability, their stubbornness, their refusal to abandon those they had sworn to protect. The story of the night at the Crystal Spire spread like fire across the galaxy. It was told in taverns and temples, in schools and military academies. The details changed with each telling. Some versions made Taiho a giant who killed 100 enemies. Others said he had supernatural powers. But the core of the story remained the same. When all the guards fled, one human remained. Taiho recovered slowly. His wounds healed, but some of them left scars that would never fade. He walked with a slight limp now. His left hand did not grip as tightly as it used to. The doctors said he was lucky to be alive. He did not feel lucky. He felt tired. Queen Velisis came to him with an offer. She wanted to make him a noble. She wanted to give him lands and wealth and a title that would echo through history. He could live in comfort for the rest of his days. He could have anything he wanted. Taiho refused it all. "I don't want wealth," he said. "I don't want titles. I'm a soldier. That's all I've ever been. That's all I want to be." "Then what do you want?" "I want to go back to my post. I want to stand outside your door and do my duty. That's all." The queen studied him with her 12 eyes. She had come to know this human well over the past weeks. She understood better than anyone else in the empire what drove him. "Very well," she said, "but I cannot simply let you return as a common guard. You are too valuable now, too symbolic, so I will create a new position for you. One that has never existed before." She named him Eternal Guardian. The one who stands when all others fall. It was a title that carried no lands, no wealth, no political power, but it carried honor. The highest honor the empire could give, Taiho accepted. Years passed. The crystal spire was rebuilt. The rebellion became a distant memory. New threats rose and fell. Alliances shifted and changed. But through it all, Taiho remained at his post. He grew older. His hair turned gray. His face gained lines and wrinkles that mapped the years of his service. But every night, he stood outside the queen's chamber with his blade at his side. He never complained. He never wavered. He never asked for rest. Young Valorians would come to see him. Cadets from the military academies, children from noble houses. They wanted to meet the legendary human who had held the door. They expected a giant, a warrior carved from stone and iron. Instead, they found an old man with kind eyes and a quiet voice. "How did you do it?" They would ask. "How did you stand against so many?" Taiho always gave the same answer. "Decided to," he said. "That's the only secret. When you decide that something matters more than your fear, you can do anything. Even things that seem impossible." The cadets would leave confused. They did not understand. They could not understand. Their instincts were different. Their biology was different. The ability to choose against fear was not something that could be taught. It had to be felt. But some of them remembered his words. And years later, when they faced their own impossible moments, they thought of the old human who had refused to run. And sometimes, just sometimes, they found the strength to stand a little longer than they thought they could. General Nehan visited him once a year. She was the commander of the joint human-Valorian fleet now, one of the most powerful military figures in the galaxy. But when she came to the Crystal Spire, she always made time to sit with her old friend. "You could retire, you know," she would say. "You've earned it 100 times over. Go back to Earth. See your family. Rest." Taiho would smile and shake his head. "I have a duty," he would say. "As long as I can stand, I'll stand. That's who I am. That's who I'll always be." Naeong never pushed the issue. She understood. Some people were not meant for peace and comfort. Some people were meant to serve until their last breath. Queen Velas's outlived Taiho by many years. She was Valorian after all. Her lifespan was measured in centuries. But she never forgot the human who had stood before her door on that terrible night when Taiho finally passed. She ordered a monument built in his honor. Not a statue of a warrior with a weapon raised high. Just a simple stone figure of a man standing at a door. His face was calm. His posture was straight. His eyes looked forward, toward something only he could see. The inscription at the base read, "He chose to stand." Visitors came from across the galaxy to see the monument. They brought flowers and offerings. They told their children the story of the human guard. They promised to remember what he had taught them. Strength is not about size or speed or power. Strength is about will, about choice, about deciding what matters and refusing to abandon it. Humans spread across the galaxy in the centuries that followed. They built colonies on 1,000 worlds. They made alliances with species that had once ignored them. They became traders and diplomats and soldiers and scholars. And wherever they went, they carried the story with them. The story of a small soldier from a small planet who had taught the greatest empire in the galaxy what true strength meant on Earth. They still tell the story too. They tell it to children before bed. They teach it in schools. They share it in quiet moments when the world seems dark and hope seems far away. The story of Taiho, the human who remained.